The next item of business today is the members' business debate on motion number 5350. Could I ask members who are leaving the chamber to do so quietly? Could I also ask guests who are leaving the gallery to do so quietly, please? Motion number 5350 in the name of Margaret McCulloch on retail in Scotland. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would be grateful if those members who wish to speak in the debate could press their request to speak buttons as soon as possible. And I call on Margaret McCulloch to open the debate. 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. With your permission, I would like to begin by thanking all those members from across the chamber who signed my motion on retail in Scotland and have allowed this debate to take place today. As the motion states, retail makes an important contribution to the Scottish economy through investment in jobs, skills and communities, not just in my region but across Scotland as a whole. Retail accounts for 9% of all employment in Scotland, making the sector the biggest source of private sector employment in the country. The sector is continuing to contribute to our economy, even in these tough times, but I don't think anyone would dispute that retail has been rocked by 2 recessions and the threat of a third, as well as by a longer-term shift towards online shopping. Let me be clear, I don't take a rose-tinted view of retail. It is a sector in which both levels of pay and levels of union organisation could be higher. But in my opinion, we have to celebrate good practice and we have to recognise investment in the workforce where it takes place if we are to bring out the best in one of the country's largest employing sectors. That is why I welcome the Scottish-Retail-Cosortium report on retail jobs. It provides a snapshot into the retail sector and it gives some insight into how employers develop their people. Before addressing the substance of the report, I want to take a moment to reflect on where the retail sector in Scotland finds itself. Consumer spending patterns change over the Christmas period and the January sales. We had a positive sales growth in December, but the overall picture taken across the year is not as encouraging. Indeed, as the SRC has confirmed, sales growth was negative in Scotland in 2012, and what is perhaps more worrying is that consumer confidence in Scotland was significantly lower than in the UK as a whole. It underlines to me the need to restore confidence in the economy's prospects and give some semblance of security to hard-pressed consumers if we are to put the Scottish economy back on the right track. Yet reports of more high street casualties over the past few weeks, Jessop's, Blockbusters and HMV, make it difficult to rebuild confidence in an economy that is simply not growing as it should. There is an ongoing debate about the extent to which retail actually drives growth and the level to which it benefits from the disposable income of those employed in other sectors. What is indisputable to me is that consumer confidence has a bearing on retail employment, and the sector can go on to contribute more if we secure for Scotland a more confident and resilient economy. There are good reasons for doing that, which go beyond the normal economic arguments. The retail sector is a flexible employer, and many of the part-time and flexible job opportunities it offers attracts women, young people and those with family lives or other commitments to work round. As we have seen, a drop in retail employment adversely affects women and young people in an economy in which they are already at a disadvantage. In suburban communities, such as those I represent, retail very often provides young people with their first real experience of the labour market. In the report, major employers from Boots and Sainsbury's to John Lewis and Tesco outline how they bring workers into their organisation and develop them over time. And since the debate was scheduled, I also have received communication from ASDA, who have been keen to brief me on the initiatives they are undertaking, such as their National Skills Academy and the modern apprenticeships that they offer. In my professional life as a training consultant, I had a number of trainees in retail, and it struck me that with the right people and the right training, someone can progress from an entry level to management much more easily and sooner than in other sectors. Indeed, one of the stories in the report is that of Sarah, who joined McDonald's while still at school and went on to become a shift manager and is continuing to progress through that organisation. I think that when workers have the right mix of autonomy and responsibility, backed up with training, then they can go on to become more than just good workers. They can actually go out and become valued citizens of an organisation. And workers who feel valued and who feel responsible are often amongst the most productive. Working in retail isn't just about the most basic level of customer assistance. It should be about knowing your product, knowing your workplace, and having the knowledge and skills you need to anticipate the needs of your customer. That kind of worker and that kind of culture in a workplace doesn't come about by accident. It takes intervention from the employer to make it happen. Finally, Presiding Officer, I would say a few brief words about the issue that is connected to what we're talking about today, the future of Scotland's town centres. Last night, a meeting of the proposed new cross-party group on towns and town centres took place, and I was overwhelmed with the response it has received. The Scottish Government have an ongoing review, and many of those who contribute to that review attended and were keen to open up another forum for debate. This is a policy area where there is lively discussion taking place with a whole range of contributors, from the CSPP and Scotland Towns Partnerships to Malcolm Fraser and his external advisory group. Retail is changing, and it's changing rapidly, with consequences for town centres and local economies. In my own region, we have town centres which have gained bid status, such as Hamilton and Falkirk, covered shopping centres in East Kilbride and Cumbernauld, and more high streets and traditional town centres than I could name in the time I have left. Regenerating all those town centres is about more than just retail. There are a whole variety of uses that could help breathe new life into these precious public spaces. However, town centres will always have to capture some of the wealth and some of the jobs that retail creates if they're to survive and flourish in the future. As retail accounts for 5% of UK GDP, then I would hope that the Scottish Government will take that point on board when they decide how to respond to the Fraser Review once it has been published. Presiding Officer, let me conclude by thanking all those who have joined us today for this debate. Retail is an absolutely vital employer in every constituency and every region. I hope that members will therefore agree that today's debate is a useful opportunity for us all to reflect on how the sector is changing and what it means for employment in Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Richard Lyle to be followed by Malcolm Chisholm.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Firstly, can I thank Margaret McCulloch for bringing this debate to the Chamber today. People often ask me, what did you do before politics? When I left school, my first ever job was in retail grocery. I was fortunate to be employed as an assistant grocery manager for the then Belsill and Moss End Cooperative Society, where I stayed for 3 years. After that period, I then moved on to DL Cooperative in Motherwell, firstly again as an assistant manager. Then after a few years, I became the youngest manager of the cooperative in the Motherwell Brandon Street branch. Retail grocery was a job I really enjoyed. Over the years, I was in charge of bigger and better shops within DL Cooperative, and eventually was promoted to Assistant Grocery Departmental Manager. That cooperative is now ScotMid. I was in retail grocery until I was 28, when I moved on to the other side of retail and credit selling. Working in a shop is certainly an experience, and I note that retail is UK's largest private sector employer. 3 million people are employed in the sector. In Scotland alone, retail employs around 239,000, which amounts to 9% of the workforce, and more than in tourism. The retail workforce is one of the UK's most diverse, comprising 62% women, 13% disabled, 12% ethnic minority workers, in proportions reflective of local populations. Just under a third of retail workforce is aged between 16 and 24. 1 in every 8 households has someone who works in retail. Scottish retail is extremely important, as Margaret already has said, Margaret McCulloch, to the economy, with the sales of £28 billion in 2011. Over one-third of consumer spending was via shops. 5% of gross domestic product of the UK is generated by the retail sector. Retail alone accounts for 20% of turnover, 15% of gross value added in the whole Scottish service sector, which is above the comparable UK figures of 15% and 11% respectively. 9.7% of enterprise in Scotland are retailers, which are again higher than the UK average of 9%. Shopping is something we all do, whether it's essential items like food, clothing, for leisure, goods such as CDs, DVDs and books. Through our experiences in the local convenience store, in the nearby supermarket, or on the high street, or through online stores, we all have a view on what retail has to offer. From customer services assistant to fashion buyer, from butcher to store manager, from fleet manager to food technologist, the sector offers a wide variety of roles with real opportunities to learn. They can learn skills and progress through within the sector. You really can start on the shop floor and work your way through to the top. Many well-known retail chief executives have done just that. With the growth of private sector jobs critically important to the health of our economy, now is the time to champion the retail sector and what it has to offer. With the support of the government, retail can grow vital jobs and provide essential services to all our communities. Can I thank all who have supplied briefings on the subject? Margaret McCulloch mentioned earlier, and I read from the ASDA. It's a bit small, so I better put my other glasses on. But ASDA sent us an excellent briefing. They're investing in communities, supporting young and long-term unemployed, Scotland's retailer of a choice for a vocational carer. I'm an ASDA shopper, but I also get into Sainsbury's and I get into other shops. So I compliment all the shops who work and help our people in Scotland.
Thank you. I now call Malcolm Chisholm to be followed by John Mason.
Presiding Officer, I'd like to congratulate Margaret McCulloch on bringing forward this important motion, commend the Scottish-Retail-Consortium on its report and recognise the important contribution of retail to local communities, to training and to employment, including flexible employment. The motion refers to women and young people in particular, and I note that 62% of jobs throughout Scotland in retail are taken by women, and that almost a third are filled by young people between 16 and 24. As the Retail Consortium's report points out, for many young people, the first experience of the world of work takes place in customer service within the retail sector. It provides a great environment where key skills can be developed. Being able to communicate clearly and concisely, understanding the value of courteous service, and working as a responsible team member are all transferable skills that will benefit both employees and future employers enormously. The popularity of the retail sector as chief area of employment in Scotland is reflected in the recent recognition given to employees through apprenticeship schemes, such as the John Lewis programme highlighted in the Consortium's report. These apprenticeships go further in building on the experience learned through employment and allowing employees to progress and feel they have a stake in the success of the company. A member of staff in Edinburgh named Sarah, aged 21, expresses in the report that it is a career rather than just a job. I think that shows the way in which truly investing in the development of employees in the retail sector can change mindsets and increase the enjoyment and indeed the stability of their position. The content of retail apprenticeships has been developed following extensive discussions with a cross-section of retailers. The focus is on ensuring that young people gain the core knowledge needed to work effectively in the modern retail world. However, there is flexibility in the programme content. Choices are possible within retail apprenticeship programmes to ensure the programme suits both the apprentices' work role and their working environment. Of course, we must also recognise the challenges faced in the retail sector at present and make sure that the policies enacted in this Parliament do as much as possible to strike a balance between protecting support to smaller businesses while encouraging investment from larger employers, many of whom provide the apprenticeships I have just discussed. I'm very lucky in my constituency to have a large number of excellent small businesses, particularly in streets such as Leith Walk and Broughton Street, and notwithstanding the difficulties that the former suffered through the tram works, I hope that the reinstatement of Leith Walk that is going to take place over the next year will see those businesses flourishing further once again. Nationally, however, it is not good news everywhere. I think this week experts have warned that there could be as many as 40,000 empty shops in Scotland's high streets in the near future, and some of those would be small businesses and some larger. Reference has already been made to long-established high street chains going into administration over recent months, such as HMV, Jessops and Blockbuster. In 2006, Edinburgh Council published a review into the key sectors of Edinburgh's economy. They noted that retail is central to the revitalisation and renewal of communities in the city, providing a vital community service, a focus for physical regeneration and sustained investment and people in places. The future success of this sector is therefore central to the future success of the city's economy as a whole. Now, with the publication of Edinburgh by Numbers 2012-13, we can see just how crucial the sector is for regeneration of infrastructure in the capital as a source of employment, as an economic driver. A table registering the number of people in employment in Edinburgh by industrial sector for 2010 illustrates that wholesale, retail and repair in the city employ 36,300, or 12% of the overall workforce. The figures also show that Tesco and Asda are the two retail employers in the top 15 job creators in Edinburgh. In conclusion, Edinburgh is a city looking to compete on a global scale. It is home to the Parliament, a successful financial sector, and in the foreseeable future it is set to benefit from a truly 21st century transport system. And I believe that transport system, in particular the tram, notwithstanding its controversies, will ultimately contribute to retail, the development of retail and the success of retail in the city centre.
Thank you. I now call John Mason to be followed by Elaine Murray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Having just heard a little about Edinburgh, you'll not be surprised we're going to hear a little about Glasgow now as well. Firstly, can I thank Margaret McCulloch for raising this issue for debate, and I certainly happily agree that retail is an absolutely key part of our economy. I think it's also appropriate to thank the Scottish-Retail-Cosortium and John Lewis Partnership for hosting the briefing event earlier this year, which the Minister also spoke at, and I thought that was a very useful evening with a lot of information and useful contacts and from a wide range of backgrounds. Obviously, I am particularly interested in Glasgow, which is the largest retail area in the UK outside central London. We have the central city centre, we have there both malls and standalone shops, and then throughout the city we have major shopping centres like the Fort and the Forge in Glasgow's East End, and town centres within the city, which is something we maybe forget sometimes, like Partick and Byres Road, as well as more local shopping facilities. I think when we hear about new shops being opened in our areas, most of us are very positive about that. Sometimes we look below the surface as to why a new shop is opening, and sometimes it's because there is increasing demand and increasing consumption, and that's positive, and that hopefully attracts more people to the village or the town or the city where the shops are going to be. However, on the other hand, it's not good, obviously, if people are spending more and getting more into debt, as I think happened for a number of years and hopefully has reduced now. Margaret McCulloch mentioned consumer confidence, and my only word of caution about that would be confidence can be a good thing, it can also be a bad thing. If confidence can be wise, but confidence can also be unwise. But the other reason for shops opening is because they're replacing other shops which are then led to close, either in the same or other locations. Now, that may be good if there's a better choice, more convenience, better prices, these kind of things. And we have seen a trend over certainly my lifetime of supermarkets often replacing smaller shops. I must say I don't like the claim that some shops are creating jobs. OK, some may be additional, but in many cases they are replacing jobs in smaller stores. And of course we also see out-of-town developments replacing town centre developments, and within Glasgow we see Buchanan Street and Ingram Street growing, but at the expense of Sauchiehall Street. I'm grateful to Asda also for their briefing today, and I have a major store of theirs in my constituency. And I have to say my impression of Asda is generally quite positive, and they have a community involvement. And I quite like the fact that they call everybody colleagues rather than employees, although everybody would have their own view on that. But they do talk in their briefing about creating jobs across Scotland, and I do feel that's just a little bit disingenuous, when in fact it's the same money which is switching from other shops into Asda, and presumably some of the same employees or colleagues who are moving from other shops into Asda. Maybe this is just inevitable progress, maybe this is the way life goes. I'm old enough to remember in Glasgow the bookseller John Smith, which had been around since Burns' time, I think 1751 in fact. It was replaced by Borders, and then, ironically, Borders is now replaced by Amazon. I have to say I like both of the shops. But the temptation is to use online nowadays. I'm going away next week for a few days, and I was looking for a guidebook. I knew what the price was. It was £6.99. I knew exactly what I wanted. I looked on Amazon. It was a penny plus £2.88 for postage, and it is difficult to argue with that. OK, retail's changing, and I want to finish on a positive note, just 3 points. Re-echo the point about getting a foot on the employment ladder. I think Asda is an example of somebody who's gone from the bottom to the very top as chief executive of that organisation. I think maybe the schools need to do more to show young people that retail is a good career. I welcome the fact that we still have many small family businesses, I think probably in every constituency. We still have good local butchers, good local bakers, although the candlestick makers seem to be thin on the ground. Many shops are also selling Scottish produce, which I very much welcome. I remember Morrison's came to Scotland and my mother couldn't get her Baxter's soup anymore, but I'm glad to say that's a thing of the past. Thank you.
Thank you, and I now call Elaine Murray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I too would like to congratulate Margaret McCulloch for drawing Parliament's attention to the importance of the retail sector to Scotland's economy. Like Richard Lyle, I earned my first wage in the retail sector. I took a Saturday job with one of the retailers featured in Retail in Scotland, the nation's favourite job, at the age of 16, which was quite a long time ago. I worked full-time between leaving school and going to university, and I seem to recall my first wage was a whole £9 a week, but it's surprising how many clothes my first wage packet actually managed to purchase. All three of my own children have worked in retail at various times, and as Margaret McCulloch's motion states, retail has and continues to provide flexible employment opportunities for younger people. And as Malcolm Chisholm said, it also develops many useful skills, the customer services skills Malcolm spoke about, but also things like punctuality and needing to turn up to work with a smart appearance, and these are all good training for other employment. Retail, of course, is a major employer. Around 9% of the workforce in Scotland, with women and young workers well represented in the workforce. But as Margaret McCulloch says, the recession and the ever-increasing use of online purchasing have presented the retail sector with a number of challenges over the years, challenges which we have seen affect our high streets and shopping malls, most recently with the collapse of Comet, Jessops and HMV. And 2012 was particularly tough, with Scottish retailing consistently underperforming the UK as a whole, though sales in December rallied a little, with a positive increase in non-food goods for the first time that year. Total sales were 1.5% up on December 2011, but in real terms that is actually just flatlining. Now, we've heard from Malcolm Chisholm about Edinburgh and John Mason about Glasgow, and I'm going to tell you about Gretna. In contrast, the Gretna Gateway Outlet Village reported its most successful trading year in its 13-year history in 2012, with sales up 33% on 2011 and around 2 million visitors. The last 5 weeks of 2012 were the best weeks ever for the Outlet Village, and ended a year which showed growth in 30 successive weeks. Several new premium brands have moved onto the site in the last year, all of which, of course, is good news for the local economy and for the 400 people employed at the centre. So 400 people employed on one site is a pretty major employer in a rural area like Dumfries and Galloway. Now, Gretna, of course, is world famous for its weddings and the Gretna Green blacksmith shop, but the outlet centre is also proving an additional attraction to the gateway to Dumfries and Galloway. This success is probably due to two main reasons. First, that the shops sell brand items at a discount, and therefore they are competing with those online purchases which people can often get cheaper by Googling. And also it is well situated, despite being in a rural area, with easy access to the M74, A75 and the M6. It was indeed quite a long campaign to persuade the former Scottish Executive to amend its signage policy for trunks roads and motorways to enable the outlet village to be signposted from the motorways. But as someone who is involved in corresponding with my own ministers over the years, I do like to think that this change in policy has helped contribute to the success of the Gretna outlet village. So despite all the problems the sector has had to face as a result of these tough economic times, retail continues to play an important role in the Scottish economy. And as we can see in the case of the Gretna Gateway, it can provide substantial employment opportunities in rural areas as well as in urban areas, especially when those areas are well connected to larger centres of population. The biggest challenge, I think, probably is faced by our high streets, through the competition with our out-of-town shopping malls and online retailing, as others have said. And that, of course, is where we do need creative thinking to take place around the mix of leisure, business and retail opportunities, which can again make Scotland's town centres vibrant.
Thank you very much. And I now ask Angela Constance to respond to the debate, and if you could do so in around 7 minutes, Minister, I'd be grateful.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, can I add my own congratulations to Margaret McCulloch for securing the debate. I always think this Parliament is at its best when people bring with them their expertise and their knowledge from their life before they were an MSP. And I think it is important to note that nearly 40 members of this Parliament signed Margaret McCulloch's motion. Now, we've heard from other speakers, we've heard about Malcolm Chisholm and shopping available in Edinburgh. John Mason has spoke about facilities in Glasgow, and of course Elaine Murray has spoke about the facilities at Gretna, and I of course have frequented them all over the years, in addition to the shops and facilities that are available in my own constituency in Livingston, because like Richard Lyle, I happen to agree that shopping is indeed important. I suppose to turn to a more serious point, as opposed to my own guilty pleasures, Presiding Officer, it is heartening to see that recognition across Parliament and across parties of the importance of the retail sector's place in terms of our economy, but also in terms of investment in skills and jobs, and I think crucially our communities, because I know Morrison's, most certainly in my own constituency, do a great programme with primary school children that takes them into the store, exposes them to a great learning environment in terms of food, but also in terms of the range of jobs that go to supporting supermarkets. A great example, I also believe, of the opportunities afforded to us by Curriculum for Excellence. But there's no doubt about it, retail has a significant contribution to our economy, and the health of retail is a very visible barometer of the economic climate. And of course retail, like other sectors, has had its challenges, its difficulties and indeed its successes. Unlike other areas, retail continued to grow during the early part of the recession in 2008-2009, but it had far more modest growth from 2010 onwards, very much flatlining over the last year, lagging behind elsewhere. Although, you know, the increase in retail sales of 1.5% higher last December than from the previous year, I hope would give us some ground for optimism. Now, in terms of total employment, we know that retail employs 251,000 people. That's 10.2% of the employed population, if we include actually those owners of shops and retail outlets who actually work in the business. And the thing that always really interests me is not just the direct employment opportunities created by retail, and certainly in terms of the briefing from ASDA, it spoke of the additional 10,000 jobs it supports via its own supply chain. And I think it has to be heartening when we hear of the Asda store in Forfar in terms of employing people who were previously experienced long-term employment. In fact, 80% of the staff recruited for that store had been previously unemployed. Malcolm Chisholm and others spoke of the importance of retail in terms of the opportunities that it affords young people. It is very often a young person's first experience of the labour market, something that I myself experienced in my mid to late teens, something that I attribute my varicose veins to, standing many hours in a shop. But it is important to recognise the range of jobs that are available in the retail sector, opportunities from entry level to graduate level. And the heartening thing is that in retail they're recruiting for aptitude and attitude, and it is very much a meritocracy where people can start off in the shop floor and rise, I suppose like Andy Clark did, to become the Chief Executive Officer of a major supermarket. And I think the work also of other concerns, such as Aldi, who is recruiting 17 and 18-year-olds to train them up to be store managers, is most certainly worth a mention. And in my capacity as the Minister for Youth Employment, I've certainly met with representatives and visited, as the Tesco, John Lewis. Indeed, one young person who I met in a major supermarket told me that if I was really serious about youth employment and wanted to boost the economy, I would use the £30 million of youth opportunities funding and to build 3 supermarkets. It does suggest that would get me into hot water somewhat, to say the least. But there's no doubt about it that retail has an important contribution to make as part of the Make Young People Your Business campaign, because there is a positive business case for employing young people, and I think the retail sector demonstrates that well. It is important to recognise that 96% of businesses in retail are small, therefore the employer recruitment incentive that will go live this April for employers to employ, for small employers to employ young people is of course important, and as a result of an earlier members' business debate, I've certainly given that commitment to ensure that all members get good information about the Make Young People Your Business campaign and the employer recruitment incentive, in addition to other offers that are available locally and nationally, so that MSPs can go out and engage with businesses in their own locality. In terms of the skills agenda, and it is important to recognise the difficulties of the ongoing climate. People have mentioned HMV, Jessops, Blockbusters, Comet, etc. And there's no doubt that as shoppers, our habits are changing in terms of online sales, which I believe have went up. And that does present challenges to the high street. And I suppose one facility that I would like to emphasise is the flexible training opportunities, which can be used by small businesses on practically any training opportunity that can allow them to retrain staff. And it may well be a great opportunity for small retailers to be training up their staff in things like e-commerce. But I do think there's a lot of work to do in terms of how we regenerate our high streets. I know there's the cross-party working group on town centres, which will no doubt be crucial in taking forward, amongst other things, dialogue with the government and how we continue to celebrate the successes and push for further success in retail, but also reinvigorate our town centres. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And that concludes Margaret McCulloch's debate on retail in Scotland, and I now suspend this meeting until 2:30 p.m.